To find solutions, first you must understand the problem. Systemic racism runs through our society, mostly unseen by people that it doesn't negatively affect. But historian Reggie Jackson's goal is to educate everyone on the ways systemic racism was established, has evolved, and the ways it now affects the African American community in ways that other communities may not be aware of. Thank you for joining us, Reggie. And I know there are a lot of people who are watching who have heard of systemic racism or maybe structural or institutional racism, which is, another way we've heard it referred to. Please help us understand what is systemic racism.
Well, I think the first thing is to dissuade people from thinking of racism as individual acts of bigotry, because that's how most of us have been taught. That's what racism is. Bad actors, bad things that they do, and that's racism. But really, the racism that is systemic means that it's embedded within the institutions and organizations within our society. So what happens is every institution, whether it be healthcare, education, criminal justice, all of them have systems behind them that work, and they lead to very specific outcomes. So when you look at the outcomes of systemic racism, you know that it exists because you can predict what is going to happen to a person based on the color of their skin. So that's the very simple way I explain systemic racism, is when you already know something about that person based on how they look. You can make a prediction about their lived experiences.
The Sherman Phoenix serves as a model for healing our city, generating both positive economic and social returns. So talk about the significance of the Sherman Phoenix here in the neighborhood.
The Sherman Phoenix has become a landmark in the community, a place for healing, a place for the meet and greet, for good food, for just great entrepreneurial energy. As Funky Fresh, I'm super excited to be able to provide healthier foods to the community.
So when we walk down by Fond du Lac Avenue, where we have the Sherman Phoenix, we also have a police department all right here. Systemic racism deals with policing. It also deals with economy or economic scenarios for people of color. So we can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Here in Milwaukee, we hear all the time, Milwaukee is the worst place to live if you're an African American person in the country, right? And the reason that people say that is there are multiple standards of living that when you look at the difference between African Americans and other people, whether it be whites, Latinos, Asian Americans, whatever, the disparities are very stark. They're more stark here than they are in most other places in the country. And when you add all of them up collectively, you see that there are some very serious issues. For instance, when you look at policing, the state of Wisconsin has the highest incarceration rate for black males in the country. Right. We also have the second highest incarceration rate in the country if you include black females as well, which people generally don't know.
Well, we all know that healthcare also falls under that umbrella of institutional racism as well. So talk a little bit about how that falls into place.
You see, we have just extreme disparities when it comes to a variety of different measures. The infant mortality is exceptionally high. Our maternal mortality rate for black women is exceptionally high. Rates of diabetes, rates of lead exposure, all of those types of things are part of the systems that allow people, when they live their lives, that they encounter all of these systems that impact their lives differently if they're an African American versus a white person, particularly here in Milwaukee.
So if you would kind of break down the educational system, particularly here in the city of Milwaukee.
Our educational system is a combination of what's happened over centuries, right? Back during the days when we were enslaved, we weren't allowed to read and write. It was against the law, right? When we finally got freedom, we looked at the schools where a majority of African Americans lived in the South, but guess what? Those were inadequate schools, not necessarily because the teachers were bad, the administrators were bad, they were outstanding people. Our schools weren't funded the same, right? I have two photographs from my hometown, back when my mother was a student. And it's a picture of the library of the white high school and a picture of the library of the African American high school. And when you look at the library, the white high school library, Every shelf on the bookshelf in the library is full of books. When you look at the picture of the African American school, you have 7 shelves and only 1 shelf has books on it. So you see those things add up over the course of time, put us behind, and then we're constantly trying to catch up. Our current issues with COVID, it's about years and years and years, generation after generation, of us being treated differently, us being treated as guinea pigs when we were enslaved. The fact that when we go to a healthcare practitioner, that we know we're going to be treated differently. They're not going to ask us the same level of questions. There's multiple studies that show that this happens. They're not going to ask us the same level of questions when they do kind of the history of, okay, tell me about your family and history of this, that, and the other. They're not going to be nearly as thorough. They're not going to treat you the same if you come in and you're complaining of pain. There's an old stereotype about us that we don't feel pain in the same way that white people do. And if they treat you different based on your race, your outcomes are going to be different. And that's how systemic racism kind of permeates all of the spaces that we occupy.